Hello, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I would like, to welcome you to today's class. And I remain, Bashir Ahmad Shagir, who is taking this course. And today, by God's grace, we'll be looking at, chapter 4 with the title Basic Ethical Issues in Taxation. So you see, it's like if we're talking about ethical issues, it's like, we are talking about issues that so we are talking about, what issues uh, you know, ethical issues, in taxation, because it's like, when we are talking about ethics, almost every professions, they have, their own ethics. Like for we, as, accountant, whether if you belong to, Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, or you belong to Institute of, Chartered Accountant of Nigeria. So it's like, we do have, what, a code of ethics. So of which, what, each and every member, of accounting profession, regardless, of the profession, you belong to. So you are expected as to abide by those code of ethics. So we have, the code of ethics. I think, we have the one, that is being given by IPAC, that is International Federation of Accountants. So we have, the principle of integrity, the principle of, objectivity, confidentiality, professional behavior, or technical, competence. So all this is like, these are the professional, these are the code of ethics that each and every member, is expected to abide by it. So the same thing, with the taxation, we have, the basic ethical issues in taxation. So that is what we'll be discussing today by God's grace. So in our introduction, ethics in taxation refers to moral principles and standards of behavior that guide both taxpayers and tax practitioners in fulfilling their obligations. So that's mean if you're talking about this, ethics, it's not only by the tax officials or tax officers that are expected to be you know of to abide by this what code of ethics. So the same thing with the taxpayers too, because sometimes there could be a kind of compromise from both sides, that is from the taxpayers end, and then from the uh tax practitioners what end. So in that case, it's like, both, the taxpayers and tax practitioners, so they are expected as the, to abide, by the moral principles. So while, discharging, their, what responsibilities toward taxation. So now, since taxation is crucial for national development, ethical conduct is essential to ensure fairness, transparency, and the trust in the tax system. So now, quickly, as we are discussing about, the ethics, let's, understand what this ethics is all about. So when we are talking about ethics, ethics deal with right and wrong conduct in human behavior. In taxation, ethics emphasizes compliance with tax laws, honesty in reporting income, and avoiding fraudulent practices. So that is, what, the ethics in taxation it entails. So it's like it emphasizes, the compliance, with the tax law. So the taxpayers, are expected, to comply, with the tax laws and regulations. And they are expected, to be honest while, declaring, their income, for tax purposes. And also, they are expected, to avoid all form of fraudulent, what practices that make them, to evade tax, or that will make them, paying a lesser amount, as what as a tax. So that is, what this ethics, it entails. And it distinguishes, between the right and wrong, isn't it? So that is, all about ethics. And that's, what ethics in taxation it entails. So now let us quickly look at, some of the importance of ethics in taxation. So number one, it ensures public confidence in tax system. So if it happens, it's like, the tax officials or the tax authority itself, it ensure or it, it encourages, the compliance, with the code of ethics, by a tax, what official. So in that case, it's like, it will ensure public confidence, in the tax system. So the tax system, that, a certain, what government, is having in place. So with that level of, with that level of, uh, you know, with the kind of, what ethics that is being put in place, so that, will really ensure public confidence, in the tax system. And number two, it also promotes, voluntary compliance. So of which, we have, a lot of schemes, that, was, have been introduced, by the federal government of Nigeria through, what we call BETS, that is voluntary, asset and income declaration, as well as, the other one that is voluntary, asset, offshore asset, a regularization scheme. So of which, under this, tax amnesty is like it encourages, the taxpayers, I think, to voluntarily comply, that is, by paying their taxes, especially, for the previous years, which, they either, underpaid the tax or they did not even pay anything as a tax. So in that case, it's like they were given a kind of opportunity, for them, to come and declare, the income and the asset, they have, so that, it will be subjected, to tax accordingly. And that under that, what tax amnesty is like the tax defaulters, they were waived, from the, penalty as well as interest. So they will only be asked to settle the tax due or the tax liability for those periods, that they fail to declare, their income or asset, as the case may be. So another importance of this, ethics in taxation, it helps, to curb tax evasion and tax avoidance. So in as far as, the taxpayers, they realize that it is, their civic responsibility, as in, to file, their return, for tax purposes. So this, it will really help, in curbing tax evasion and tax avoidance. Even though for the tax avoidance, that one is by illegal means. So it is a situation whereby the taxpayers, are now are taking advantage, of the loopholes that, what exists, in the tax laws and legislation. So they can now, what take that advantage by paying a lesser amount, as what as a tax. So while, if you're talking about tax evasion, so that one, is illegal. So it has to do, with manipulation, of the records, just, for the taxpayer not to pay, the tax, or may end of, paying a lesser amount as what as a tax. So it's like, having a very, strong, ethics, in taxation. It really helps, in covering or stopping tax evasion and tax avoidance. And then the next, importance of this ethics in taxation is also protect reputation of tax practitioners. So, like, when we are talking about, tax practitioners, it's like, we are talking about the professionals that is being licensed in Nigeria. We have CITN, that is, the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, and it is, the profession that is being allowed, in Nigeria, as in, to licensed to register, tax practitioners in Nigeria. So it's like complying or abiding, by that code of ethics, of that profession, of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. It will really help, in protecting the reputation, of the tax practitioners, those, that have license to, as tax practitioners in Nigeria. And then also, it encourages accountability and transparency in government revenue administration. So basically, it's like these are some of the importance of ethics in taxation. So the next thing, we'll be looking at is ethical issues in Nigerian taxation. Ethical issues in Nigerian taxation. Okay, let's first of all, start, with the first one, which is the tax evasion and tax avoidance. Tax evasion and tax avoidance. So this is one of the ethical issues in the Nigerian tax system, not only Nigerian tax system. So it's like, I can even say that, in the global taxation, not only Nigeria, because it's like this tax evasion and avoidance, it remains, at the biggest challenge, of tax administration globally, not only in Nigeria. So we can only say maybe like, for the other, developed economies. So it's like maybe it may not be, as, it may not be, as biggest, challenges as it used to be in Nigeria because of, the knowing the importance, of the tax. And, it's like the citizens, of those countries, it's like they all understand that it is their civic responsibility, to pay tax, to the government. Unlike here in Nigeria, so it's like, you've seen people, they're having, sources of income, but they do not know or they do not realize that, it is, their civic responsibility and to pay tax, to the government. So now let's, quickly look at this tax evasion and tax avoidance as one of the ethical issues in the Nigerian taxation. So let's start, with the tax evasion. So just like we said, tax evasion is an illegal act of deliberately refusing to pay tax, or maybe engages in fraud or underreporting, of income, or maybe a taxpayer might end up, falsifying, the the income or the annual return, so as maybe to end up paying a lesser amount, as a tax, or may end up, paying nothing as what as a tax. So that is, the tax evasion. So of which, committing or engaging in this tax evasion, like we said, is a crime which is punishable in the Nigerian law. And then, the next one, we have is the tax avoidance. So like I said, this tax avoidance, it involves arranging affairs legally to minimize tax liability, though it may raise ethical, questions. You understand? So like we said, it is allowed, the taxpayers can now exploit or can now identify the loopholes, that exist, in our Nigerian tax law. So in that case, they can now take that advantage, like maybe, like maybe claiming for per capital allowance, other incentives, and the rest. So in that case, it's like, exploring or let's say identifying this kind of, opportunities that exist, in the, tax law, or yeah, in the tax law, in the tax system, by